looks like it's not live.
It's not.
No, I'm checking from a couple of places. It doesn't look like we're.
I'm looking here on the.
So sorry, Nate. Hate to interrupt you.
Yeah, I think we're live.
It's
Oh, you're seeing
I
it?
checked my phone. Yeah, look like we're live.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
good. So it's just on
seeing
my
it.
end. Awesome.
All right.
There we go.
So
Go for
keep
it.
rolling on. This yes, I buy from a very reputable wine and spirits and beer dealer that I trust to age their products properly. They haven't disappointed me yet. It's Susan's Fine Wine and Spirits, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Now, totes. This was slang. And, it checks out. This slang was popular in probably about 2017. I don't think people say totes anymore. You'll notice it's spelled differently. I said my theme is ales.
Nobody says totes anymore. I say that every once in a while. Damn, behind the times.
Maybe I just
No, I think you're right. I
I
think
have no concept of what the current
I think it's
slang
the
is.
theme of tonight. It's just me.
So, like I said, this is a farmhouse ale, and the reason why it's called Totes is because it is brewed with 100% oat malt and Brettanomyces yeast.
The Brett, the wild Brett.
So, should I open it up now and do the pour, or should I
yeah,
wait
go
you guys
for
to
it.
do
Alessandro, I'll
so?
let you. What are you opening with?
It's my turn. Oh,
Oh, it's your turn. Yeah.
All right,
All
let me
right.
point out real quick. I've had one already, so I know. I got to try to angle this properly without spilling beer all over my wife's computer.
Don't knock
But
over
you
the
see-
Oh,
skull.
wow.
You can see they stored it right because all that yeast collected there
That's yeast?
on the.
That is some
That's
wild
crazy.
yeast. Look at that. Just hanging out at the top of the bottle. Oh, that's all going in the glass right now, too.
No, it
Getting
actually
poured
sticks
right in
pretty
there.
well. At least for the first one I did. I don't know about this one, but that's all right. It's
It looks good. Looks good. Look at that carbonation there, like all that nice foam. So to join you here,
Yes.
I got actually a local that Joe has actually tried, but I had to feature it because I had a chance to get my hands on it. So
Oh,
we
is that a
featured
Berry
the
House?
Berry House. Sorry, the light here is a little, but they're Vienna style lager called Family Tradition
That's
that
so good.
actually
That one is so good.
recently won the gold medal in the beer world competition. And so I thought like this was fitting, like it's not necessarily an Oktoberfest, but it has some similarities, like, so I thought it would be a good one to open with. And I'm excited to have it here with you guys.
Yeah, we got to do a little tour of Berry House when I was visiting Alessandro there, and they pulled out the Vienna Lager. We did a little tour in the back, and then I think it's like, oh, you got to try this one. We don't actually have it in the front of house yet. We're not serving it, but we will be really soon, and we're going to be entering it in this competition that Alessandro mentioned. And so he poured us each a pint of it, and I just remember trying it, and it was so good. I'm really jealous that you get to have that again, because all their beers, that brewery was just unbelievable. Everything they made was so clean and crisp and tasty and just unique. Like simple beer styles, when you think like a lager, or even a Vienna lager, or even their Dunkel, was just so flavorful, so just complex.
Very, very good. Yeah.
Looking for my beer. I lost my beer. There's my beer. Okay. So I'm going with something that's probably a little bit more accessible than what you guys are opening with, but I've got a good rare find for my closing bracket. But this is one of my favorites. Alessandro, I've told you about this a million times. I wish we could review it and you could get it, because it's become one of my go-tos. This is a very popular beer in Scotland, and this is the Tennent's Lager. And I don't know if you've ever tried this one, Nate.
Nope.
I love this beer. It's a very common lager in Scotland, but what I like about it, and it's got a little bit of an interesting story to it, which Alessandro and I are always a sucker for. And so this is actually made with water from a Scottish loch Katrine. So it's a loch beer. I love that.
It's possibly there's a monster in that lake as well. In the
Or
loch.
the runoff, a monster. Who knows? Well, we're going to open our beer brackets here, and we're going to pour out a delicious beer. If you are joining us, I see we have a couple of people in with us right now. Sorry for the little technical difficulties before, but if you have any questions, let us know what you're drinking. Feel free to post in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that. We got Dave Coleman with us. He's on. Welcome, Dave. Hopefully you're having a bear along with us. Let us know what you're having.
What are you drinking?
Yeah. Cheers, gents. Let's pour these up and let's get started.
I feel like I always make the faux pas anytime I'm on. I always pour before you say it's okay to pour.
there's no okay
There's
into the pouring, Dave.
no,
Don't worry about it.
yeah, there's
Everything's
no right or wrong. Like it's
There's no bouncer to show me out of the beer bracket.
just kick you out of the beer brackets pub.
there's no rules. It's just like hanging out and
Stay out of
having a good
Riverdale.
time.
So I'll point out to the viewers, I wore specifically my Carolina Hurricanes jersey to stand in solidarity with the fact that we had to reschedule the beer brackets pub live stream.
Yeah,
our live
because of a
stream got
hurricane.
hurricaned out last week.
yeah. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for the support. And yeah, that was pretty much the reason. Like we were waiting till the very end, but turned out like to be potentially coming this way. So we rescheduled and thought like,
Yeah.
and luckily everything is good. So cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
The Carolina Hurricanes are my mortal enemies. And them and the Canadians do not see eye to eye. This goes back many, many years.
Back to the Whalers days.
I don't know if it goes back to the Hartford days. I'm thinking more it goes back to like 2005-ish, I think. When this first playoff series that they had. Yeah, there's a whole story there. The captain of the Canadians who just come back from cancer was injured by Justin Williams of the Hurricanes with a vicious high stick that hit him in the face and like cut his eye. He was out for the rest of the playoffs. And that was the year they won the cup.
Yeah, 2000. I can't remember if it was a 2000. They won the 2006 Cup, I think, and so
it was probably earlier than that. It might have been like 2004.
I always get confused in hockey. Like 2006 Cup, that means they won. And I get confused because like football, it's like you win. The season is very closely tied to the year that you start.
Yeah,
But in hockey, it's like anyway.
So Dave's having from the Napanee Beer Company the Extremeless Belgian IPA. Belgian IPA. Napanee's really good. So Napanee, Ontario, Canada, they have their beers are really accessible here. I've never tried their Belgian IPA, Dave. Let us know how it is down there. I've tried a couple of their beers before. I was part of this Canadian Discovery box. It was like beer of the month where they'd send you once a month. You'd get a case of 12 with all different microbreweries, and Napanee was always really featured in there.
That's nice.
How's the Vienna Lager, Alessandro? How's it tasting this second time around?
This is so delicious, and I will say like it's better obviously on tap, but still like the foaminess is just like so nice. Like the mouthfeel is so creamy. It has like all those beautiful roasted notes, but it's not quite as much as Dunkel. It's almost like an in between a regular lager and a Dunkel. But it has those nice like toasted elements that are showing right at the end, and you get a little bit of the hops. Extremely well balanced, very drinkable and sessionable. You can easily drink a whole stein of this, no problem. It's so delicious. Highly recommended.
Oh, what I really love about this one, it's nothing special really when it comes to lagers. I've tried a couple of others that recreate this, but I love this one characteristic that this has that I haven't been able to find in too many lagers that do it in a really nice, clean way. It has a kind of cereal-like taste and aroma to it, like that kind of really sort of deep breadiness. And I think cereal is probably just the best descriptor that I can come up with, because everybody can kind of imagine what, taking a big whiff of like a bowl of cornflakes or something like that, really sort of intense oatiness that you get from it. There's that on the aroma and the taste, but not in an overpowering way, not in a way where it becomes sort of like sweet. It's really nice. It's just a nice compliment to all the characteristics there. And I really enjoy that. I find it's really unique. And plus it's just got that Scottish lock water that just, you're drinking directly, you're suckling from the teat of a Scottish lock, which is just fantastic.
It is pretty great, I would say. How about yours, Nate? How is that?
Well, I'd say, I obviously don't know how it tasted in 2017, but it tastes fine now. I mean, it tastes pretty nice. It's like I've never had a 100% oat beer before, but it's really, really dry. I don't think there's any residual sweetness left over. It's very dry. It's got some bitterness to it. It's kind of like it's sort of tart, it's way more tart on the smell than it is on the taste. And so it kind of has this like lemon pith bitterness. Yeah. And then because it's a little funky, it is a farmhouse ale. It's kind of got that, like, even though I don't think I've ever smelled this smell in real life, it's like I've tasted so many beers that have this taste and aroma that I feel like I can say it. It's got that like horse blanket or horse sweat
kind of like
I love
taste.
that
That
descriptor.
it's pretty good.
The horse blanket. You wouldn't think that would be so descriptive, but it really is.
Yeah.
You can
It's
picture it, even if you're not like a horse person.
yeah.
Just imagine
You
what
try
that's.
a couple of those beers, and it's just like it's very distinct.
The one thing that surprises me is it's something like, I think I remember reading, oatmeal stouts. They're typically like 5 to 10% oats, and the oats are supposed to give it like a heavier body. And this is really like, I mean, I wouldn't call it light, but it's not like, I don't know what I picture, but I picture something like more viscous. This is really, I mean, drinks like a normal beer. I'd say that the mouthfeel, it's not registering to me as anything different. So I thought that was kind of interesting about it.
That's it's nice, and I think like we've featured a few, but that's definitely a style that we haven't covered a lot. So it's nice to have it here on the live, and then hear some impressions like.
So we got Dave again in chat, nice and spicy. And the Vienna reminds me of my university days. Selling some good university days there, Dave. Old Vienna. That sounds familiar. I imagine Alessandro's is far superior.
Well, yeah, it's. I mean, to be
Old
honest,
Vienna,
like
yeah.
I'm not, other than this, and I know that Yingling kind of like is a little inspired from Vienna style lagers. I'll be honest, I haven't had many Vienna style lagers, and so this one here to me tastes incredibly delicious, mostly because of the balance that it has between the malt and the and the hops, and like many of the Berry House beers like have that characteristic, like they making a lager, we've discussed about that like many times. It's always about the balance, because you have so few ingredients, and that it's difficult to find the right balance.
Dave, looking up Old Vienna here, I never heard of this beer before. I think maybe growing up in Quebec I missed out on it. I've never seen this there, but it looks like it's pretty available in the LCBOs and the beer stores. It looks like this is just Vienna by name, but it's like a light lager. So I think it's a little bit different from the Vienna lager that Alessandro has there, like the really more dark and malty.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can kind of see it here, but it's a little bit more on the amber, if you want, style.
Old Vienna. I can't believe I've never seen this before. Thanks for bringing that up, Dave, and introducing me to a new beer. I'm gonna have to try this one out.
Yeah, it's always
St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, there you go. I'm gonna look for that then. Nice. See if I can.
We got Jake who popped in the chat as well. Cheers, guys.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
Jake.
Hector too. Some of the regulars. Hey, from New York. I didn't know he's in.
Yay! Cheers, cheers, guys.
Welcome from New York.
I really like Vienna lagers. There's one. They're not really a local brewery. They're more of like a regional brewery. They from Durango, Colorado. They're called Ska Brewing. I think they're pretty old, maybe like, well, relatively speaking, 96 or so. And their Oktoberfest is really, really good, and it's explicitly a Vienna lager.
Yeah.
I reviewed a beer over Labor Day ish. The review came out over Labor Day, and that's also it was an Oktoberfest. It didn't say anywhere on the can like, oh, it's a Marzen. Definitely wasn't a fest beer. So it definitely, to me, was not sweet enough to be like a Marzen. So to me, it was more like a Vienna lager. Kind of had just that more richness.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good style. I think when a Vienna lager is done right, it's really, really nice. I was definitely jealous of you guys going to Barry House.
Barry House, yeah, that was.
It's
that looked like a cool brewery.
Show it here. So
that was really fun. There's actually a second part to that episode. We posted the actual being in Barry House there and doing getting the demonstration of the slow pour. We also did a full tour of the brewery, did an interview with the owner and his wife, and we did a different tour of a neighboring brewery called Coppertail. And we used some clips of that in our Why Are Craft Breweries Producing More Lagers episode, the Inside the Brackets episode. But there's a full tour on that one too, though we still just haven't gone to. There's so many. That's one of the things. I don't know if you've experienced this, Nate, having a channel, but I don't know what your schedule is like or how much time you dedicate to it. But we just for us, this is just us hanging out together and us having fun and spending time, and two friends getting together and doing something fun that's a hobby, and talking to each other and spending time with each other and socializing, right? So we get together once a week no matter what to record. Well, sometimes we miss, but most of the time it's once a week. But the production of editing everything and putting it out isn't as quick, so you have this backlog of just all these things that we filmed that there must be 20 episodes that we filmed going back like 7-8 months. Even some of them are pretty old, that we just like those brewery tours and stuff like that, where it's just you can never get to them, because I think unless you're doing it full time, which obviously we're not, it's putting out one a week or one every 10 days or whatever it is, that takes like, that's kind of the maximum output that we could do right now. So there's all these things, there's all these amazing reviews that we filmed, all these amazing episodes that we filmed that are just like sitting on an SD card somewhere that I'm hoping you get to one day and put out. But yeah, the Barry, long story short, sorry for going on a big tangent there, but the Barry House tour is one of them. And the great thing about that brewery was, and I think we mentioned this in the episode too, we were doing the tour of Coppertail, which is a much bigger microbrewery down the street. And the guy, they were there basically telling us like, yeah, we all go to Barry House when we're done work and we go drink there. We go have a beer there when we're done work. And so that caught our attention, because it's just like, well, these guys, they're a pretty big successful microbrewery and they do a lot of experimentation. They have a big range of beers and their beers are really good and they're really successful. I don't know if they export outside of Florida, Alessandro, but I mean, like, they're pretty accessible everywhere in southern Florida, at least, right?
I don't know if they do, to be honest.
Okay.
I think their distribution is predominantly in the state. I might be wrong, but I think
so
it's
they're
mostly here in the state.
They're good at what they do, and for them to say like, yeah, we go after work, we go drink here, like this is our beer of choice, our brewery of choice. So that's what put us onto them. And then when we got there, it was just, I mean, everything you saw in the video with the Lucre taps, the side pour taps, and the slow pours, and that blew our minds. But the quality of the beer was just something I've never experienced before. And I don't know about you, Alessandro, but like, and it's, yeah, I'll let you elaborate a little bit more, but everything I tried, the lager, the Tampa Export lager, the Vienna lager, the Dunkel, it all had a very unique characteristic to it, where it was very flavorful. Everything was unique in its own way, took a familiar style, but made it, expanded on it. And just sort of every little element that you could pick out from a taste or an aroma was just accentuated. And they're really good at making beer. Like, really good.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I think that's an example of like a brewery that it's is that using a little bit of family, family recipes, and also
Is there another hurricane blowing over Florida?
Yeah, we got another hurricane coming through. You're freezing up a little bit there, buddy.
Am I? Okay. Let me see here.
I think there was I think what Alessandro's point, I think, is there's another YouTube channel that does beer stuff, beer related things, and they posted a video today and they were drinking some lagers, and they said, I drank one and he said, this beer is so good, it takes me back to a place I've never been. And I think that's one of the things about a really good lager just does that.
I agree. I think like you could say a really good beer does that, but I agree specifically about lagers, how they do that. And we actually had this conversation a couple of times recently about beer and how it's kind of like one of the reasons we love it so much is it's kind of like a way to travel. And so when you have a beer and you read about the history of it and you understand the history behind the brewery, behind the techniques, behind that particular recipe, and it's kind of, it's a form of travel. Like you said, it takes you to a place that you've never been. It kind of like, it makes you nostalgic for something that you've never experienced.
Right. And I think it's funny because like there's a lot of beers that I have some nostalgia for. And definitely when it comes to lagers, it's like they do capture a different nostalgia. Like I would say like some of the beer, for example, there's certain beers that I like a lot that do take me back to a specific instance. But I would say like a really good lager just takes me back to like a feeling. And the first beer I reviewed for Lager Summer this year was the Red Oak.
Love Lager Summer.
Bavarian Amber Lager out of North Carolina. And that beer is just like, I mean, maybe it's just it was ubiquitous during my time in grad school in Raleigh, but it's just that beer is like, it's perfect. And it's like one of like 2 or 3 beers that they brew year round and distribute. And they've just nailed it. I think that's like what a lot of lager only breweries tend to do. They really kind of like focus on like 4 styles and maybe have 2 rotating ones versus a typical craft brewery or whatever you're going. They've got like 12 beers on tap. Maybe part of that is just like the limited scope of lagers relative to the broader world of beer, but I'm a big fan.
That's always nice. Like when you find a beer or a brewery or like you said, like a feeling, a flavor that connects you, it's great. Like it's a comforting feeling. And I think like a lot of times, like going back to the to the lagers, like they have this particular power of because they're so gentle in a way, but also very subtle to hint at things. And when you find the one that speaks to you, it just like it just clicks, like, and it just drinks also so easily. So
And I don't, one of the challenges I have when I do, so those who aren't familiar with my channel, I try to review just lagers from, or at least, astronomical summer. So June 21st to September 21st or so, just review lagers only. Not that I don't review lager. I actually don't think I've reviewed any lager outside of that period, but it's not really on purpose. It's just
keep it exclusive
that way. And for reference, if you don't know my channel, I only review about like maybe 2 beers a month. So I think that schedule is going to increase a little bit just because I tend to run into a problem where I have like a big schedule of upcoming reviews, and then like I start missing out on seasonals, right? Because like otherwise the review will come out too late, right? Like right now I have reviews out through November, and that's with me airing more reviews than I normally would because I want to review like the winter beers around December and stuff. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have the same problem.
But one of the things I notice when I review a lot of these lagers back to back is unless there's like adjuncts in them that is specifically, giving you a certain flavor, it tends to be that they tend to be really hard to dissect, in my opinion, into different flavors. I mean, there's like the basic ones, like biscuity, bready, crackery, and so on. But those are, I mean, even when you think about it, those are like saying something's bready. Well, if you ate a piece of bread, that should be dissectable into further flavors. It's really hard, I think, when you're drinking lagers to really like dissect that flavor profile into smaller parts.
I really appreciate that you said that because it's really the hardest thing that I've had to do since we started doing this channel was describe a lager or a pilsner. That's the toughest thing I've had to do because, like you said, a lot of them are very distinct in their own ways. But pinpointing that, like by saying something's bready, exactly like you said, or saying something's malty or hoppy, it's like it's too general, right? Because, like you said, there's the differences are so subtle from each one to each one that pinpointing the exact thing that makes one special. Like with this one, I'm very happy that I found that like that cereal descriptor because I think that's something that's a little bit, even though that could be pinpointed a little bit more. I think that's something that evokes a certain memory within people that they think of something specific, a certain kind of breadiness or oatiness, or graininess, however you want to say that. But yeah, it's tough. And especially doing them justice. If you have a really good, clean, crisp, flavorful lager and you want to be able to describe how is this different from a Stella, how is this different from whatever lager that or pilsner that people might have in mind that they're using as a frame of reference, like what descriptors do you use? It's tough. It's not an easy job.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it has its its positives, and I think that well, first of all, like just talking about them is a starting point because there's many other styles that are a little bit more popular at the moment, and I feel like lagers are becoming for sure. But because they're so clean, like they might not require as many descriptors. But I like what Nate said, like about the feeling, right? Like when you find one that it brings on certain we call them intangibles, right? Like the certain intangibles to you, that's all that matters. And sometimes it's a very subtle flavor that you can't quite pinpoint. And sometimes it's also just a transition of a flavor. Sometimes it's a different dimension. So I think that having the conversation is a great start. Like just talking about it, or at least that's how I feel.
We got Nick Constantine Poppy in the chat. Cheers, boys! Having a Stella unfiltered. Do you get unfiltered in the US? Because that doesn't exist in Canada. I've heard about it, but I've never
heard that.
I don't think I've heard that. Like I know there's a trend now here in at least where I am. Like there's a lot of the major breweries, especially Germans, that have been making unfiltered Keller beers, Zwickau beer.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard about the Keller beers, but
I haven't seen the Stella. So
I saw a picture of one once when I was doing some beer research and looking for graphics for an episode. If I'm not mistaken, I think it has like a dark green label. Let me see here. I've never seen it. That just does not exist here. Maybe it just might be a European thing. Not sure where
could be.
good old Nick is there. Unfiltered lager, Stella Artois unfiltered lager. Yeah, there we go. It's like a dark green label. Okay.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
It's see, that's another thing I love about like when people comment, and maybe now a lot of times we might not be able to get like in this case, like it's probably we're not going to get to it anytime soon, but it's definitely something that if I see a recommendation on the shelf, like it's definitely ringing a bell and like makes me want to try it. So it's thank you for commenting.
I really like hearing about people's local favorites, and I think local trends are really interesting. But I also like hearing the local favorites, and because one of the things I love to do is like if I'm just driving through a state or something and I have a chance to grab a 4-pack or a 6-pack, I think that's a lot of fun. Yeah. Just taste 100%. What those breweries that I cannot get their beer are doing.
100%. That's it's traveling in a different way, like, and tasting what you can access there. Yeah.
I'm so curious about this Stella unfiltered. I'm trying to wonder what this would be like. I've never had an unfiltered lager before. Like you mentioned, like the Keller beers, or even like I think I've had an unfiltered Kolsch before too, if I'm not mistaken. But a lager, I'm really curious. I guess it would be just a little bit more hazy.
Yeah,
there's this. Oh, go ahead.
No, please. No, I
was going to say my only frame of reference is pretty much Keller beer. There's a brewery in Santa Fe called Raleigh Farmhouse Ales, and last year they brewed a beer called, I think they called it El Pastor, and it was a Keller beer unfiltered. And I don't know if it was just name association, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with Al Pastor tacos.
Yeah,
they're made with pineapple, and I swear this beer tasted like pineapple. It was crazy.
Really?
And it's like I said, I don't know if they did it on purpose.
Yeah.
With that name association, or if I just connected the dots subconsciously, but it was. I mean, I find that they're not like funky, but I think you get like that fruitiness from the yeast that you wouldn't normally get in a lager.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, from my experience with the Keller beers, I've only had some of the. Well, that's not true. I've had like a couple of more, let's say, independent producers, like to use a different word, but when you think about Weinstefaner, what else, Bitburger I've tried recently, and a couple of others. But yeah, I would say for me, descriptor wise, usually, well, yes, they're hazy, and the other big thing is that they're way richer in as far as mouthfeel, and I also would say that the finish is way more complex. So there's definitely more flavors. We're still talking about lager realm, so we're talking about a narrow spectrum of flavors, but it does make a huge difference. So the
Alessandro,
problem. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to. But I was just going to say, can you guess what my favorite unfiltered beer I've ever had was, or what the most interesting unfiltered beer I've ever had was?
If I can guess, like that is let's see.
It's one that we had together.
Oh, unfiltered. Well, is it the ABT 12?
Is ABT 12 unfiltered? I don't know.
I would assume, because it has yeast in it.
That's true.
So I'm not 100% sure, but normally if I'm not 100% sure, but I would assume.
I'm thinking about the San Michele Pale Ale.
Yes. That's a delicious one.
Dude, we've always, our dream with this channel, we'd love to do like a mini documentary on this place, but there's the most amazing, when I first met Alessandro, I went to go hang out with him in Italy when he was still living back there before he moved to the US. And so just outside of Torino, where he's from, Was the name of the town San Michele? No, that was just the name of
No,
the.
there is also a Chiusa di San Michele, which is a little city, but the
Okay.
town is Sant'Ambrogio, where they
Okay.
have the church is San Michele, La Sacra di San Michele, which
Sacra di
is
San Michele. Exactly.
yeah.
There's like this castle-looking church on the top of this immense mountain. And to get up there, it's a hike. It's this winding road, and you're going up into the clouds basically, and you can
Wow.
see this church off in the distance. And back in the day, they used to make their own beer. Like I get these monks, right, that would make their own beer, and they would make this unfiltered, unpasteurized beer, and it was basically like this thick, like this syrupy. You couldn't see through it. It was like this dark brown gold color, and they kept the traditions going. And when you get to the top of this church, I remember being like, the views were just like you could see into France, like from that mountain range. Like that's just how mind blowing these views were. And again, you're almost like pretty much almost in the clouds, it feels like. And so you do the tour of this beautiful, like the ruins of this church. And then when you get outside, there's like the little some rest areas, and then they have a little restaurant bar again with these 360 views of just like this immense mountain range. And you sit down and they're serving this same like San Michele unfiltered, unpasteurized beer. And you see like the church on the logo, and they still make it, and they're selling it. Apparently you were saying, Alessandro, they sell it in the town too, like down the hill.
Yeah, the brewery is now like they're
But that,
inspired by the brewery is in the town below, and it's they make a little wide range of beers, like, but they obviously serve them also up at they're only bottled beer, like, because they're mostly kind of like let's say Belgian style, like if you want to pick like
yeah,
the ones they make, definitely
but it
yeah.
definitely had like some sediment in it. It had kind of like, it was
Yeah.
almost like clumpy. It was like
Oh
really
yeah,
rustic.
when you pour it, like it has like poof, like
Yeah,
little
but it was good. I remember being like, it wasn't for, oh God, this was years and years and years ago, and I don't remember too clearly. I seem to remember it not being like too overly flavorful, but good. Like it was smooth.
Definitely, yeah. It's
Yeah.
probably not one of the most let's say complex, can we say, but definitely also, like,
Still,
drinking it there where you are, like, it's a power of place for sure.
it's the power of place. Exactly. You're sitting on the top of this giant mountain overlooking the ruins of this old church from medieval ages. It's like yeah. That was an incredible beer experience, but that was probably the most memorable unfiltered beer I've ever had.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
I can see, I see, I completely forgot that we had the unfiltered there. Like that's a good beer memory, very good beer memory.
I have a photo of that somewhere. I don't. If I find it, I'll put it on the replay of this live stream. Maybe I'll find a way to include it.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, the photos from that trip, I don't know what happened to them. So we have Dave Coleman still in chat. NBC Blacklist is another local favorite. Dark lagers are great, like Czech lagers. Yeah, the Czech Var dark lager. Dave, being from Ontario, and he said he's from Kingston. Yeah, Kingston, Ontario. So you being in Ontario, Dave, I'm sure you know the LCBOs. Yeah, the Czech Var dark lager is very, very easy to find there. It's probably the most common one that they have. That's a good one.
I want to point out that I'm at a bit of a disadvantage here. I've got the 11.2 ouncer, and it looks like Alessandro's got a 16 ouncer. Joe, that one looks like it's pushing 20.
It's the angle. I've angled the
Okay.
camera to look upwards. It's just like it's an illusion
It's like it
The
looks
time
it
you
looks
use
to
that
make me
bigger.
look more important. No, it's a standard 500 milliliter. So I don't do ounces up here. I'm not sure what that is, but
500. Let's see. I think this
what's yours? Would it be 750?
this
No.
is 16 ounces, which is
12
probably a
ounces
little
is
bit
350, I think. 12
Yeah.
ounces is 350, I think. So, or 330. So 16 ounces is probably about 500.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit under, but like
Okay.
yeah, about 500. And yeah, you got the this European style, like 330,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this beer is
yeah.
actually, like, they say it's a collaboration with Stillwater Brewing, which I looked it up. They're a Washington brewery, but I could not find anywhere how they collaborated on this whatsoever, like what they did. Um, it's made in Italy, so I don't know exactly what that brewery did for the collaboration.
Hmm.
That's awesome.
So Dave, yeah, 16 ounces is 500 milliliters. There we go. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Hector back in chat just opened a Sam Adams Oktoberfest. Nice. I've never had.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I've
haven't had that
actually
one in
no.
a
That's a
while.
lie. I did
It
have
bugs
it
me
one
that
time.
that they spell it with a C.
The what?
It bugs me that they spell it with a C.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah.
Is that like a copyright thing?
I don't think so. I think it might just be to
It's just a
like.
mistake.
I don't think it's a mistake either. I think it's probably just to like distinguish themselves from the other ones.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know. That's what I'm guessing. Or maybe it is because like they can copyright Oktoberfest with a C. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder. Well, because everybody else uses Oktoberfest with the K, right? It seems like every
Yeah.
microbrewery out there making a fest beer or something has Oktoberfest plastered on it. So maybe it's not a copyright thing.
There's a beer group I'm in about like local New Mexico beer, and there's somebody on it. It's a really interesting. He's not a YouTube channel. He does he runs a website called primepassages.com. And it's a really interesting website where he does what he calls beer hikes. I don't think he invented that. I think a friend of his or an associate invented it, but it's this notion of you go on a hike and then you drink a beer.
I love it. I love it already.
And then like I don't want to say I copied him, but I certainly wasn't doing this before I read his articles. But he was actually asking around, like, are there any breweries in local breweries that make fest beers? Most microbreweries are making Martzens usually,
Mhm.
and it made me think, yeah, it's like they should be making some fest beers. I think but I feel like it's kind of like I think somebody responded who worked at a brewery, and they said something like, it's just hard to do because a lot of people probably don't even know that a Martzen is a lager or that the Oktoberfest beer is a lager. But because it's dark, it's easier for them to kind of like, oh, it's good. Versus like if you pour a light lager, it turns people away. Not to steer the conversation about lagers.
That's where our conversations tend to go most of the time.
Yeah.
All right. I think we should. It's about that time where we close our beer brackets here in the
Are
Fall
we
Beer
ready?
Brackets Pub.
Yeah.
I got to rinse my glass because I've got quite a bit of sediment down there.
Yeah,
so
look at that.
be
That's
right
true. All
back.
the sediment from the top of the bottle.
Fair
Nate is rinsing his
request.
glass. I did want to mention for anybody who might be curious about how you could join us for a live, if you did want to have a beer with us, there's a link down below in the description of the video if you want to join the Beer Explorers, help support the channel. So we're not a monetized channel, but if you do, and we never expect any kind of support, but if you do want to support the channel a little bit, one of the perks, there's a few perks, some of them such as discounts in the merch store, free merch items every couple of months. But also one thing is if you want to, you can join us on these lives and you can open and close your beer brackets with Alessandro and I, or Nate, if he decides to join along as well. So there is a link there down below. Feel free. We do appreciate any kind of support. But more than that, we just like to have interesting conversation and beers with people. So that is the best possible end result of that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so excited for this closing beer bracket. The first one, this is one of my go-tos. Like I was saying, it's kind of like, I'm not say easy to find, probably easy to find if you can get it, if they import it where you are. But my closing one is what I'm very excited about. Nate, because you're the guest, we'll let you start.
Yes, please.
Closing your,
Okay. I'm pretty excited about this
hydrating?
one. Yeah.
Hydrate. That's a good
Live
idea.
in the desert.
Oh man, I should have
You
brought
gotta
some.
hydrate. So this is a really good beer. It's a beer I like a lot. I mentioned at the beginning, my theme here was farmhouse ales.
Yes.
And I said these beers are going to be at very different spectrums of the farmhouse ale spectrum. And I will say that this beer, pretty much every review I read online was like, this is not a farmhouse ale. I don't know why they call it that. Hey, whatever. It's not for me to decide what the brewer decides to call it. It's a very classic beer, a very beloved beer, a very famous beer if you live in the state of Wisconsin and nowhere else otherwise. And it is Spotted Cow out of Laris Brewing. So
Okay.
If anything's going to be a farmhouse ale, got to be
it's
the
definitely
Spotted
not a
Cow.
farmhouse ale. I mean, it says on the can that it's a farmhouse ale, but I've had this beer before. It is not a farmhouse ale. I won't give away what I think it tastes like. It's been a while since I've had one. So I'm not from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
This beer, I don't know if people who watch this or if you guys are familiar with the channel Red Letter Media on YouTube.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So
Their
they do like
movie
movie
reviews are great.
reviews. They've done
Yeah.
like over a decade now.
Yeah, they're one
most
of like
famous.
they've been around forever on YouTube.
Yeah. So I've watched them since I was in like high school. or even
Yeah.
maybe even before high school. Geez, like 2010, 2011.
Yeah,
Before I
you're
was
dating
even in high
yourself here,
school.
Nate.
Yeah. Don't let the hairline fool you.
I'm older than you are, so don't worry about it. I'm just warning
But
you.
so the hosts are from Wisconsin, and so before I even drank beer, it's like I knew this beer because all their beer reviews or not beer all their movie reviews, they'd be drinking the beer. So finally, I have a pretty good friend in town who we love to chat beer, and his parents live in Wisconsin, and I think he went to school in Wisconsin, so he's all there all the time, and he brought me back a little New Glarus care package, and I got to try it for the first time, and it's definitely good stuff. It's one of those beers that I think is like it gets so much hype because of its exclusivity to the state of Wisconsin. I mean, it's ubiquitous in Wisconsin, but like,
Gotcha.
if you're 1 foot over the border, you cannot get it because they just don't. I think it has to do with distribution stuff. They just don't want to sell it outside of Wisconsin. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I see the label again just
Oh,
in
sure,
case
yeah.
I
I
ever.
meant to put it.
Yeah,
it's,
Dave in
I think
chat is
like they
saying
sell it in bottles.
he was born
and
in Wisconsin.
cans.
Oh, nice.
There we go. What a
In
coincidence.
bottles and in cans. And I would say this is probably their like flagship beer. I know people really like the pale ale. My mom happened in Wisconsin, so she bought me like a 12-pack, and it was actually like it had this in them, and then like a bunch of lagers, and they were all really good.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I would put them in the category of they're like I think we maybe talked about it last time. I can't remember if it was on the stream or off air, but they're in the category that I would say of like really good, maybe mass market beers is the right way to put it. Beers like Yingling, where they're like that, maybe not like what we would consider as a craft brewery nowadays, but they're like that cut above a normal mass market beer, even though they're, like I said, not available outside Wisconsin.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Like it's more exclusive. It means like it's a treasure. You need to go there to find it.
Yeah, exactly. Makes it that much more unique. So Alessandro, what are you closing with? I've been dying to see this.
So the one I'm closing with, I went this time a little bit more Oktoberfest like, because it is, after all, like, close to Oktoberfest. It would have been at least last week. I am closing with, and I'll try to put it here so everybody can see it.
Ayinger.
And their Oktoberfest. Their Marzen. So not fest beer that we were talking about earlier, but their Marzen. I've actually never had this one here. I had never seen it on the shelf until recently. I've had other beers from this brewery, but not their Oktoberfest. So I'm excited to try it here with you all tonight.
I really like their Doppelbock. That was
the Celebrator.
What do they call it? So yeah,
the Celebrator.
That was really good.
That's a fantastic one. That's probably my favorite that I've had from them. I'm excited.
So, and if Dave looks like he's still in chat. Not sure, but I think they might do open vat brews. Guessing talking about Nate's Wisconsin brew. Yes, that's good to know.
That's always
definitely it's unfiltered. We'll see. It's definitely unfiltered. But I think like flavor wise, well, I don't want to spoil what I think of it.
No spoilers. We want to hear the live reaction.
So, Dave, if you're still around here, being from Kingston, Ontario, I'm sure you know about this one. So this is a brewery from Toronto, Ontario, which I talked about in one of our Beer Bracket of the Month episodes. So this is Bellwoods Brewery. Ooh. So a really, really, really good microbrewery based in Toronto. And so they have a series of beers called Jelly King, which are basically dry hop sours. And so they have a whole different line of dry hop sours that they make all under this branding Jelly King. And I know that you can get these outside of Ontario, specifically the Jelly King branded beers that they have. Those can be found. But this is just the standard dry hop sour that they make, which is delicious. This is kind of like one of their flagship beers, and this is available in any liquor store in Ontario that you go to. I'm pretty sure you can get this one in Quebec too. I'm pretty sure I've seen it in some little corner dépanneurs there as well. But this is such a fantastic beer. When it comes to Bellwoods, I went into deep detail into that in the Beer Bracket of the Month episode. I believe it was episode number 9, if I'm not mistaken. But they do, sours are kind of like their forte, but they do a lot of lambic inspired beers as well. They have some beers that are white wine influenced. So they very much have the taste and characteristics of a white wine. They even have some beers that are aged in white wine barrels to give that kind of flavoring to them. So everything that they make is kind of tart and very sort of pungent in that way, with those kinds of flavors that you would expect when you think of a white wine. So I'm excited. This one is really, really good. I'm not a massive fan of dry hop sours. I can appreciate one here and there, some good ones, but this is a very, very, very tasty beers. So cheers, gentlemen. Let's crack these open.
Cheers. Yeah, I want to point out before we do anything else. I think I said before high school, 2010. I meant before college. I don't want people thinking I'm like 20 years old or 22 years old. That would be bad if I looked like this and was 22. I've got a little invader, so promise he's not drinking any beer.
That's okay. That's okay. Well,
oh man,
I tried to save the audience from what has been my last few seconds. I've been in my office, which faces, the camera would be facing like a big sunroom window, and the lighting was always abysmal. So I tried to fix that. Unfortunately, I'm in the line of fire of bottler and interest. So I hope people forgive me.
that's
You're
totally
forgiven.
fine.
Don't worry about it, Nate.
Absolutely no problem.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
That's good.
Oh,
Alessandro, when you come, and you better be coming soon, but when you come visit me
nice.
up in Hamilton, we are definitely taking a trip to Toronto, and we are going to check out Bellwoods because they make so many incredible beers.
They definitely sound like a place that it's not only worth it, it needs a visit.
It does. So Nate, how is that one? I'm so curious.
This beer is so good. I mean, it's kind of what we said about lagers, right? Where it's like there are certainly flavors. Like I'm getting banana. I'm getting a little bit of like probably orange. So it is. I should say it's also made with wheat.
Oh, nice.
So it's wheat and malted barley, and because of that, I would say it comps pretty well to like a Blue Moon or like a kind of like American wheat type beer. I definitely like it. I'm not actually a big fan of Blue Moon. I think it's way too sweet. This beer, it does still have that like pretty good residual sweetness, and it is just kind of like an American wheat. That's the way I'd put it. Is an American wheat beer. I just think it's really nice. It's really drinkable. It's an excellent beer that I think it deserves the hype in the sense of like, in the same sense that Yingling deserves the hype, where it's like it is a really solid beer to drink and not think too hard about it while you're drinking it.
There's a couple of things to unpack with what you just said there. So first off, I think I understand now why I was going to ask you why you thought it wasn't a farmhouse ale, but the fact that it has, that's a wheat beer essentially. I guess that's the main thing.
It has no funkiness. I can remember who in the chat said that it was open vat fermentation.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where they're coming from when they say it's farmhouse ale, or maybe it's it's unfiltered. It's pretty cloudy. So
it's really interesting. We did that episode on
like funky tastes.
Yeah. We did that episode on farmhouse ales, and it's one of those things where it's almost like cream ales, where when you're looking for a descriptor of the style, there's a very general description of saying, okay, the term originated from here, and this is what they used to do. And it's kind of like almost like legends. It's not an exact sort of description. It's like, oh, back in the day, they would brew these seasonal beers for their workers, and they kept them low alcohol for this reason, because they had to work on the fields. They didn't want them getting wasted. They wanted to be like something they could drink to refresh themselves, to quench their thirst. There's all kinds of stories like that, like sort of anecdotal things, but there isn't like a set descriptor of the style. But if you've had a couple of them, then you understand what it is, or what it's supposed to be, or what it's accepted as being. But it's so I was curious. I wanted to ask you like why you seem very adamant about this isn't a farmhouse ale.
It's just it doesn't hit those notes. To me, a farmhouse ale, it's got to be a little bit funky. I mean, you got to be
like
getting,
a saison.
or or heavy like bread notes, or maybe even tart or sour. I mean, and maybe that's just maybe I've taken too narrow of a definition, because we've in modern times we've sort of over compartmentalized different styles and stuff. But I don't, like I said, this to me is American wheat through.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good point that comes from this conversation, is that there's one thing which is like the origin of a style, which is like, I think Oktoberfest is a great example, because it started more like as a Marzen, if you want. That's kind of like where it started, right? Like a more darker and a little bit sweeter. But now, really, like what's served at Oktoberfest is way hoppier and lighter and more like a fest beer, right?
Yeah.
Like, so and I think that sometimes a lot of confusion comes from what people are referring to when in a conversation. So one thing is the JLCP guidelines, which are great, like they are there, but then there's the other thing, which is maybe the tradition, the place, and so it's interesting, like Joe said, like it's nice to have the conversation about it and see what's your perception about it, right? Like, because somebody served you that in a glass and told you, hey, this is a blinded, and said like, hey, pick your favorite farmhouse ale. And you said, it's probably not my favorite, right? Like, but pick your favorite wheat beer. Like, you say, oh, this is probably actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of people in chat here. We have Steve. Oh, Steve. Okay, he's a regular commenter on the channel. He popped in. Jelly King is awesome. I can get it in Calgary, where I am. That's great. So they do export to they make it available in other provinces, which is great. I wonder, this is the kind of thing where it might not necessarily be available in like a major liquor store, but sometimes there's private dealers that will sort of get their hands on some and mark it up a little bit and make it available. So maybe that's the case. And then Dave, back there are a lot of great breweries in TO, Ottawa, and Kingston area. That's true. There's actually, Ontario has a lot of great breweries, specifically in Ottawa. Bose, it's probably one of the bigger microbreweries that people can think of in the Ottawa region. They're incredible. AK Tap Room. Okay, so these beers look great. I wonder if I can grab those in Alaska. Maybe not the Jelly King. Probably the A-Inger.
If not the Oktoberfest, at least their celebrator, like pretty sure you can probably get that. It's I hope.
Speaking of which, how is that one, Alessandro? Tell us about it a little bit.
Very, very delicious. Very, very delicious.
It's the lighting, but it looks like almost rose color.
It does, right?
It has like a very nice, again, sticking to that, like
like a rosé,
dark. But so now it's interesting because I just had the Vienna lager style, right? So this, to me, compared to all other Marzens I've had, is way lighter in body compared to others. So it's actually closer to a Vienna lager. It doesn't have as much sweetness as normally some of the Marzens do. It has quite a pronounced bitterness, not overpowering, obviously, but a little bit more than normal, which I quite appreciate, because one of the things that normally makes me steer away from the Marzen, when the Oktoberfest Marzen ones are usually the fact that they tend to be a little bit too sweet for me. So actually, I kind of like this one here. It's very, very pleasant. Like the hop character is not too overpowering, but it's definitely there.
This one, and when I said originally that I don't normally like dry hop sours, I think that's a little bit of a general statement, but I think it's a matter of taste. Everything's subjective that we talk about here, right? But in general, a lot of dry hop sours that I've had tend to be a little bit just too tart for my taste. It's just not a characteristic that I personally look for in my beer, that extreme tartness that sort of just makes you like pucker your lips a little bit, and it's just a little too intense. It's one of those things where it's an acquired taste, I'd imagine, like anything else, right? So if you're drinking that beer more often than not, if you expose yourself to it, then you get used to it, then you start to really appreciate it. For me, because it's not something that I chase out too often or have too often, that when I do have it, if it's too strong, if it's too dominant, it just turns me off a little bit. I'll still be able to drink it and enjoy it, but it's not something like, if I have a choice of a couple of things on tap, I won't choose it. But this one, I really, really love, and why I wanted to come back to it today is because it has that right amount of hoppiness to it, that right amount of sour notes to it, that right amount of tart, but the tart is kind of like balanced out by the hops, which I really like. And they do mention this on their site. I was reading about this before, where with this one in particular, they want to get like the right balance between the hops and the sour notes to just make it something very drinkable, something very sessionable, and something where there isn't any one characteristic that's dominant above the others. And this one's amazing. There's like some really fruity elements there too, a little bit of peach, like a little bit of citrus fruit, but that's really faint. It's really about the hops and the sour notes, which just jump out of the glass. And I love this one. It's really fantastic. It's delicious. It's really highly carbonated. The head's kind of dissipated a little bit, but it had a really nice thick fluffy head on it before too. It's got a nice like carbonation bite to it as you're taking sips. It's very strong in that sense. I love it, man. This beer is fantastic. If anybody can get this, if you're in Ontario, this is accessible in any LCBO liquor store here if you are in the region. So definitely recommend picking it up if you hadn't have it already.
I think there's a flavor combination that I find that I'm really into is the hoppiness meets the tartness.
Yeah.
Just this last few months, I had it was called a Brut IPA, like Champagne BRUT Brut IPA from a brewery in Albuquerque, Harmon Lane. That one was really solid. And then local here in Santa Fe, Raleigh Farmhouse Sales, they did what was it? It was a dry, what did they call it? It was a dry hopped farmhouse IPA, and it was so
nice.
good. I mean, it like to me, it almost had that, like, how would I put it? It certainly didn't share all the flavor profile, but had almost that like drinking orange juice after toothpaste sensation, which sounds awful, right? That sounds like not an enjoyable one. But then you think of something like maybe Fernet Branca that has that kind of like same flavor, and it's like medicinal and botanical, and it's actually like, if you know what you're getting into, it's pretty nice. Yeah. And so I like that one a lot. It's a really nice flavor combination that, like, when they get it right, the hops and the tartness, I think it works a lot. It's interesting.
I couldn't agree more when they get it right. And it's a matter, it's completely subjective, and it's a matter of taste. And again, it's really what you're used to and what you drink regularly and what you tend to go for. But yeah, for me, it's like, I've tried so many dry hop sours where it's too much. That tartness is just way, 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 way too much. And it's when they get it right, it's so good though. It's so refreshing. It's so crisp. It's so thirst quenching. And like it transfers those flavors in a way that I can't. There may be some IPAs do. I think IPAs are good at really sort of transmitting like citrusy flavors through in beer and transmitting obviously hops and getting all those flavors across. This does it in a way where it's a lot more palatable, I find. And I'm always impressed by Bellwoods. Now, Sandra, I'm dying. I really want to go do a tour of this brewer. Just go sit in there in their tap room. Apparently they have some really good food. It's got a really cool ambiance from the looks of it. And they have a bunch of beers on tap too that you can't get in stores. And I'd love to do just some flights and some tasting there and hang out. I think that'd be a really good time.
Well, also the other one you had, like they sound like very interesting. And particular also, it's not only interesting for the flavor combination, but also particular in the sense that you don't see them often, those combination. At least I haven't. Very interesting.
They are beer lovers in a way that I'm sure exists in a lot of other North American microbreweries, but in a way that I haven't really seen, in the sense that they love to experiment in really interesting and different ways. Like I said, like the aging of beers in white wine barrels, for example, like I think it was in Riesling barrels, which in particular, Rieslings have that very distinctive flavor to them that it really translated to the beer. And then the one that I had on the Beer Bracket of the Month episode was their Intermodal, which was a limited release, but it was a mix of, I believe 4 different beers of theirs that was then aged and bottle fermented. And it was just this insanely unique beer experience like I've never tried before. So they're very experimental, but they do things like this, like a dry hop sour, very, very well. And
that's great.
So we definitely do have to go. So we have Steve again in chat.
That's a good question.
What are the bottles behind you?
Well, you should give us a little tour there of the bottles, like really quick.
Well, okay, there's only like 4. This is Chimay Red. This is actually from the review that we did, Alessandro, the Chimay Red.
I remember that, yeah.
This is covered in dust. This is an ancient beer relic.
So I have to add, well, I'll let you do the rest, and then I'll ask you a question about that.
Yeah. Then this is from our Christmas episode last year, the Fuller's Vintage Ale, which, by the way, if you haven't tried Fuller's Vintage Ale, it's really, really good. I mean, Fuller's makes London Pride. They have a couple of other beers that they that they make and they export. But every year they do a vintage ale, which is usually a mix, like a blend of some of their different beers, and also the brewers will pick choice ingredients, they say, every year that are fresh and available where they are in England, and put together their specific yearly vintage ale. And then they recommend that you age them too and keep them for a certain amount of years. And they actually have like a section on their website where if you have their vintage ale from 4 years ago or 5 years ago, you can write your tasting notes and things like that down, and which is pretty cool.
Pretty neat.
Then some Unibrew beers. Got the Raffman and the Blanche de Chambly. Unibrew from my home province of Quebec. I'm a big fan of Unibrew. Raffman is made from smoked malts. This one is actually the Blanche de Chambly. I find is a pretty standard wheat beer. Maybe that one's exported. Maybe we'll do a review of that one day, Alessandro. But the Raffman's really interested. Yeah, so they call it a smoked ale. So they don't actually, I think, which most breweries do, they don't actually smoke it. They import smoked malts, like pre-smoked malts, and they make the beers with that. So this goes along those lines. It's not overly smoky, but it gives it just a nice sort of savory taste. But Unibrew beers, top notch. Thanks for the question, Steve.
That's a good
Are
question.
those up there for sentimental reasons, or I mean,
Yeah, they're just beers that I enjoy, but also, I have this, decorative, but they're all beers that I really did enjoy. Definitely.
That's part of the beer bracket pub. Beer relics, like you said.
Yeah. Dave saying both NBC and Draft and and Daft and Kingston do barrel aged beer. I love
Nice.
barrel aged beer. There has not been one barrel aged beer that I've tried that I didn't find at least interesting.
Yeah, with barrel aged beer, it's interesting. Like and I don't know, like might just be me, but when I first moved here to the US, I tried some of the especially imperial stouts, barrel aged, and porters also barrel aged in bourbon barrels specifically, which is something that in Europe, like I don't know, like maybe I wasn't very much exposed to, and I don't know why, but like they at first I had like very adverse reaction to it.
Yeah.
Like I would drink it like a few sips and my stomach would immediately say nope. And I don't know, I've gotten more accustomed to it now, like so it's but it was very strange because I never had that happening to me, but specifically with bourbon barrels. And it was like crazy because like you could give me one like blind, like, and I could just take a couple of sips and I was like, no, this is not okay.
It's not okay.
yeah, I feel like that was a big craze, like maybe 5 years ago or so, when like bourbon just took off. It was like super.
Yeah,
It's still pretty
bourbon,
popular,
yeah,
but I don't
exactly.
think it's as popular as it was like 3 to 5 years ago. And that was when like the barrel aging really got popular. And a lot of it is like economics. Like obviously, the thing with bourbon is it needs to be like new oak barrels.
Yeah.
And when they're done with them, it's like now what? And like,
yeah,
there's interesting stories about how like Scotch, a lot of scotches are like made with used sherry barrels, but sherry barrels are so expensive compared to bourbon barrels that like prices of sherry barreled Scotch is like going super high up versus like bourbon barrel, used bourbon barrel. But I think it was just a way for like these breweries. It was very economical because I mean these distilleries are basically giving away the barrels.
The barrels are just very available. No.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting question. So we have Garrett Party. Excuse me if I mispronounce your last name there in chat. Random question. What's your all-time favorite glassware for a beer? That is a fantastic question. All-time favorite glassware.
All-time favorite glassware. So that I'm assuming that means you got to pick one. Regardless of the beer.
Any guidelines, but
yeah, no, all-time favorite, like it's got to be one, like the one you take. I'm thinking the one you take on your
beer hike
on the island, right? Like when
the one you take into the forest with you.
Or the forest, yes.
Your forest beer.
So you can file those wild beers that are roaming. I think if Nate is okay, I think we'll let him start.
You could pass. Yeah, I got it.
I feel like it's a lame answer. I like these. I really like these.
Nate, I got the
It's a
exact
wine
same
glass, but these like thin walled
Dude,
kind of
exactly.
like not,
Exactly.
you know, the nice tape on the bottom, not so bulbous. And it's kind of like, you know, they right here, down here is where they have their, I don't know what you would call it, is where they shift
they
inwards, and it
turn.
really allows for nice nosing. But at the same time, it's not like you can still fill it up pretty decent. It's not like a tulip glass. I think it's really good for nosing, smelling, tasting. But I have to say that, like,
Nosing.
other than this, you know, a giant like liter Stein, I think, is probably up there, because I think there's almost no better beer experience to me than having a liter full of beer and just taking that big old swig. If I'm being honest, and
Nate,
you know, you
I
need a
gotta say,
big
it's
glass to do
funny that you say that, because we have an episode dropping in a couple of days where that might come into play. But and it's also
Okay.
very funny. It's also very funny that we have the exact same glass,
Yeah,
because
see?
I have the same thing. It's the thin walled wine glass, the
Yep.
exact same shape. And so I guess that's got to be our answer, Garrett. I
This is
mean,
like it's a good general purpose glass, I think. Like, obviously, it's not the ideal glass for every beer style, but I think especially if you're making tasting notes, it's a good general purpose
but you know what? What I
glass.
like about it is that it does. I think in general, if you are tasting beer, you do, at the bare minimum, you want something that comes to a bit of a point, something that directs the aromas, right? That's not open ended, that isn't like flying outward by the, the edge of it on the tips. You want something that's going to direct the aromas a little bit and sort of contain them. So as a very minimum in your beer tasting glass, you want that. So these are great for that. And what I like about them too, like you mentioned, they're thin walled. And for me personally, whenever we do like a pour shot for an episode or something, I like that they're thin walled because it doesn't obstruct the view of the beer that much. But also makes you feel a little closer to the beer. Like there's nothing lingers in the beer. But if not for this, I think this has got to be the winner, just because Nate and I both have the exact same glass, which is amazing. But aside from this, I really like. I bought on Amazon actually like 3 years ago this set of 4 They just call them Belgian beer glasses, and if you Google Belgian beer glass, it's a standard thing. It's kind of like it's got a little stem like a wine glass, but it's short. It's like a short stubby glass. I use them a lot in some episodes, and they've got a very similar curve to this. They come to a little bit more of a point at the edge, but then they've got like a little wine glass stem. And the wine glass stem is fun because you can hold it and feel kind of like a little bit of a fancy ass, you know, when you're holding the wine stem, and so that's fun. But yeah, great question, Garrett. All-time favorite for my picking, one glassware for beer is a tie between a Teku or a Samuel Adams pint glass. I gotta Google Teku here. Teku. I've never heard of this before. Have either of you guys?
I'm not familiar with it. Like,
I'm
is
not
it
too familiar with glassware by name.
Oh, okay. It's like I see what it is.
the
Okay.
one?
It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it looks like a wine glass. It's got a tall stem. It's similar
Yeah,
to this.
the tall one, and then it has like the one that goes like on like a
Yes.
triangle and goes up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
So
Yeah, those are great. I
Like
think
this.
those are
that's
exactly
the one.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those are kind of specifically
know the
associated with a
name.
certain style of beer, aren't they?
Well, they're yes, but I think that more recently they've kind of become like a little bit of the glass of choice for tasting, for the fact that I like these, like we've said, for the fact that they're wine glasses, they're easily available, they have all the good characteristics, and they fit all the boxes. But those have like the stem, so you technically you're not you're not heating up your beer. And on top of that, like they have like
That's a good
the
point.
way that
That's
it's shaped, like
yeah.
it helps like for the aromas, for my understanding.
Yeah. I always find that I think the problem is when you're talking about, like, can't really compare them side by side, but like when you look at the difference, I think the problem you run into is that the Teku, it's a little wider, at least mine is.
Yeah.
Let's see if I don't know if I can show that well, but it's a little wider. And I think that
bottom.
with wine, that's fine because it's not carbonated. Well, champagne excluded, and other bubbly wines, but with wine, it's not a problem. With beer, I think you run into an issue where when you really maximize that surface area to get the aroma and to aerate it, I think you run into an issue where you might be interfering with the mouthfeel. That's my one worry about the glasses that are that wide. But hey, maybe I haven't done it enough. I haven't used them enough.
No, that's a good point. I think aroma for me is kind of the most important thing. I know a lot of people. I've heard a lot of theories, and to be honest with you, Alessandra, maybe you know, or Nate, maybe you guys know a little bit more about this than I do. I haven't researched too much on that side of things, like in terms of the type of glassware you use and how it affects the actual beer experience beyond aroma. That's been my fascination with glassware, just for the fact that I think aroma is one of the most important things for me when it comes to a beer, and I think that's overlooked a lot. When people will drink beer straight out of a bottle or straight out of a can, for instance, you're losing out on one of the most important parts of the beer. And so a glass that just accentuates the aroma, whatever that is. And Alessandro, when we did the tour of Coppertail, our tour guide mentioned that as well. And he's like, no matter what you're drinking it out of, just make sure that it comes to at least a little bit of a point, so it just directs the aroma when you're taking a sip. So when you are putting your mouth to the glass, your nose is in the glass and the aroma is kind of contained around it to get the full experience. But yeah, I'd be really interested in that. That'd be a good, whether it's an episode or whether it's something we look into in our own time, that'd be something that'd be really cool to look into. Like, I know people with Guinness, I know we talk about Guinness a lot on the channel, but people are very passionate about that in terms of how the glass affects the Guinness experience. And there's all that controversy between the new style Guinness glass and the original Guinness glass and which one is better. I don't know if that's actually a thing or not, but
it should be a VS episode, like glass versus glass.
It should be, right? So Garrett's back. True. I found it Seiko glass was very good on a Kolsch for making it colder longer. That makes sense because you have the stem, so your hand's not directly touching the surface of the beer, which would definitely keep it colder longer. And yes, I got your name right on the pronunciation.
Number 3 for me, because I guess I did 1 and 2. Number 3 would be an Imperial pint glass. I think those for some reason just seem to work really well. When you had it kind of like bulb out.
Yeah, the Nonic pint.
Towards the very top. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice too.
Yeah.
And it gives me an excuse to buy an Imperial pint.
I like the that's kind of what Dave was back in chat before, and he called it what did he say? Canadian.
Oh, the 20 ounce
real pint, but that's the same thing. That pint glass that has like the little.
Even though we're one of the only countries still holding strong to the imperial system, we still have to specify that it's imperial pint. Well, I forget that I said that. I don't know the history behind why an imperial pint is larger than a regular pint.
Your guess is as good as mine.
It's big as good as mine.
Oh, that's fantastic. We got some great questions here.
That's the glass question is a tricky one. Very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate that.
So I don't know if it's running close to 8, so I don't know if you guys want me to ask this question, but I do have a question for you that may require some. So this question gets easier depending on what styles of music you enjoy. But what is your favorite song that has to do with beer? And please chime in.
Oh, that is a good question.
Oh, that's a tough one.
And I thought this was a tough one because I could think of a lot of songs that had to do with whiskey. Seems like whiskey,
I can think of a lot of whiskey-related
type
songs.
genres.
Yeah, that's
beer-related songs. If you listen to metal music, I think you have quite a reservoir to dip into. But otherwise, it can be a little tough. So I'll start while you guys are thinking. One song I really like, and just because it's so uniquely poignant for a metal song, is by I don't know if you've heard of them. If you're a fan of metal, it's a band called Tankard. They're a German thrash metal band, and as the name implies, they're big fans of beer. And they have a song off their album. I want to say it's the late '80s, might be early '90s. Chemical Invasion. I think is the album and the song title, and it's a very intricate, elaborate song. Musically, but it's a song about how
I think we
Oh, yeah, Nate froze there a little bit. Alessandra, I don't know about you, but I'm like, maybe it's just being in the moment, but I can't think of any songs.
Oh wait, he might be back.
Oh, Nate, you're cutting in and out a little bit there, buddy.
It's connection losing there for a second. I'm trying to think.
There's so many songs that I know of that, like he said, like whiskey or bourbon. There's the classic, one bourbon, one scotch, one beer. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
It's a tough one.
aside from that, like something very beer specific. Sorry, Nate. Yeah, you were cutting in and out there a little
Sorry,
bit.
yeah.
I saw that.
I can't. You stumped me on that one. I'd have to like go through like my Spotify list.
That's a
I
tough
can't.
one.
That's a good question. But you know what?
Let's
You're
open
right
it up, and
about.
we can open it up to drinking songs too, if it makes it easier.
Well, okay. If we're gonna go drinking songs in general, I gotta say that I'm a big fan of sort of like traditional Irish music, and there's the Dubliners, who do a lot of amazing songs about beer specifically,
Mhm.
but also about drinking. And I was listening to one of their live albums like a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like on my rotation. And they have one amazing song, but all their music is kind of like it's all like very folky.
Mhm.
But the lyrics are very sort of like little haikus almost as well, or little poems. And they tell little stories. And there was one great one about a guy sneaking out to the pub every night and having a bunch of pints and then coming home drunk and finding something that he finds suspicious, and his wife trying to explain it away. So being like, "Oh, I came home and there was another
I know that
pair
one.
of boots under the bed," and she's like, "Oh, you're just drunk." And it's like, "Oh, this is like the pair of boots that my mother sent me for you." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Then Thursday came and I went and had some drink and a couple of pints and come home, and there's another head in the bed that I can see is not my head. It's like, "Oh, you're just drunk. It's just the pillow that your mother sent me that's under the sheets." All these things. This is fantastic. So if actually the one thing I can think of, probably anything by the Dubliners is up there for me.
Yeah, that's I was gonna go that same route, like the I think there's one, I don't know if it's from the Dubliners. I want to say it is going to drinking song, like I think it's called Mountain Dew, which is another word that they use for their moonshine, Irish moonshine,
Oh
if I'm
yeah.
not mistaken. And I love that
Mountain Dew,
because of
that's funny.
the very so the intro is extremely joyful. Like you listen to it, and no matter what, you can be in the worst mood ever, but you start listening to that and you're just like, oh, okay, now I'm fine. So that definitely that one there. But for beer specifically, I'll have to get back to you. I'll
And if
have
we
to
were a
think.
whiskey
I figured it
channel,
was a tough question.
But a
if we were a
good
whiskey
question.
channel, there'd be so many options.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
whiskey. This whiskey in the jar, like
Whiskey in the jar. Oh my god,
that's
yeah.
just the start.
Exactly. Great
That's
Metallica song as well. Their cover. Really good.
That's yeah. Very, very good question, Nate. Like thank you for that one. It's gonna make me
Hey.
think. Keep me thinking.
Nate, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What was the first beer you ever had? I'm guessing this goes back to your college or teenage years. You remember what it was?
Oh, look at that. Like we might have
I'm thinking what I would say it'd probably be one of it was probably MGD. I'm almost positive.
Really?
At least once I probably was just curious, what does this taste like? And took a MGD from the fridge in my parents' basement and tried it. And to this day, I still actually like MGD. I don't know why, but it's like everybody in my family, that was like the go-to beer in my family at all events was MGD. And I actually think it's a pretty decent beer for what it is.
So a follow-up question. If that was the first beer you ever had, what was the first beer you ever had that you remember really enjoying?
So actually, this is kind of like, I don't know how old I probably would have been 18. And my wife and I had just started dating. And I remember,
that's amazing. Congrats.
Yeah. And
that's great. I love hearing that.
And we, I wanted to make her a nice dinner. And what I broke college student, I couldn't afford wine. To convince my friend, I'm Googling, looking up, going on message boards, finding out like what's the best beer you can get that's like a nice beer. And somehow I landed on Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Like $2 for like a 32-ounce bottle at the time.
Yeah.
I don't even think they sell those anymore. And so that was the fine beverage accompaniment for the meal. Now the meal itself was very terrible. It was I found an Alton Brown recipe. I don't know if you guys know Alton Brown. He's the guy. What show did he do? Good Eats. Yeah. And he so it was an Alton Brown recipe, and it was for pan fried salmon. They just like put a little bit of oil in the pan, fry it on each side, serve it crispy skin, whatever. I did not know much about cooking. I actually grew up vegetarian, so I probably had just started eating fish like within the last 6 to 12 months. So I didn't even know anything about fish in the barest sense. And so I read the instructions. It says fry in oil. I'm like, okay, so I got to deep fry this. So I filled the pan with like probably 2 inches of oil and deep fried the salmon for 4 minutes per side, and it was disgusting and inedible. And probably the only thing we actually ate was the beer itself. And I remembered it was like super bitter, but I was like, there's something like this is weird, but it's good.
Yeah.
Obviously now, like
When you're first developing like your
me,
palate and taste for beer, like a Sierra Nevada pale ale could be kind of shocking, right?
Yeah. And so, we talked about earlier, I was like beers that I'm nostalgic. I have them and I remember a specific moment for sure. Like, I mean, I love Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I'm not going to move the camera, but Sierra Nevada is one of my favorite breweries. Although, I think I've talked about, I commented like I don't like the direction they're going and basically being an IPA only brewery, but Sierra Nevada Pale Ale was like probably the first, I would say, good beer I liked. And that was kind of what turned me on to good beer, so to say.
So we got a couple of people in chat who answered the question as well. So we got Duke Man who popped in. First beer I bought with my own money is Guinness. That is a good first beer to buy with your own money. And then we got Garrett again coming back. Says first beer Budweiser. First beer I loved was Guinness. So a lot of Guinness in the chat, which is amazing. We're big fans of Guinness here. So that's Alessandro. I think I might have asked you something similar before in a different live stream that we did without Nate. I was curious to hear his answer. But just for everybody who might not have heard, what was your first beer you ever had and first beer you had that you really loved? So I think Guinness might have been your answer for the first beer you loved, right?
Yeah, first beer I love for sure, Guinness. Like I've talked that like endlessly on the channel, so that's not a secret. But first beer I've had, obviously in Italy, being in Italy, and I'm half Italian, half Danish, so both two countries in which like drinking you start. It's pretty seen like as a normal thing. So you start relatively early without putting any numbers, like not drinking, but trying at least. Let's put it that way. Trying, testing things. So I would say it was probably a Birra Moretti, or if it was not a Birra Moretti, it was for sure a Tuborg in Denmark. It was one of the two. And I would say that either one, like I thought, like kind of like what Nate said, like it's like, oh, okay, this is very bitter. I think like my first reaction like was, wow, like this is very bitter, or a different type of bitter compared to anything I've had. And going back to Guinness, that's where like I found like something that had that bitterness, but also had some more pronounced maltiness and more deep, characteristics and notes. So. But how about you, Joe? Like we want to hear about you too.
That's so funny that Guinness is like the common denominator there for so many people. Two people in chat, and then you as being the first beer they tried that you really liked. That says a lot about it.
Yeah.
For me, the first beer I ever had, unfortunately, was Colt 45. Does
that even count as beer? I think this is malt liquor.
It's malt liquor. I don't know if that's even counts as beer. Yeah. But,
I actually think in the US, I want to say malt liquor doesn't have to have hops in it.
Oh, okay.
Am I wrong about that? I don't know. There's some legal, there's a legal definition. It might also be like they can fill it full of adjuncts that you can't add to beer, like just straight up, cane sugar or whatnot.
If it wasn't Colt 45, then it must have been either another different beer that you could get for cheap in a 40 at a corner store and bring to a party. It was probably either Labatt Blue was a big one that was really readily available. That was definitely some of the first ones that we tried. And then there was like in Quebec, there was all these different variations of Labatt Blue. I know like internationally, if you're in the States, you just get the regular Labatt Blue, but in Quebec, there was Labatt Blue Dry, there was Labatt Blue Extra Dry, there was Labatt Blue 8%, 9%, 9.5%, 10%, 11%, 12%. They had all these different variations in 40s that were all at every corner store. And so probably one of those, if not, if you don't count Colt 45. The first beer that I had that I really liked, funny enough, was a Unibrew beer, Le Fin du Monde. Was the first beer that I had. I remember after drinking like at all these house parties and things, like drinking these dirty 40s of Colt 45 or whatever we get that was cheapest, because back then it was just like, oh, you go to a party, what has the highest alcohol percentage and what's cheapest, right? And that's what you would get. But once I actually started being like, you know what, I want to try something good. I remember seeing the bottle, the 750 milliliter bottle of the Fin Zimone with the cork at the corner store and being like, I want to try that. I'm curious about what that is. And it was obviously strong. I mean, for somebody who didn't have like a developed palate for beer, drinking a Fin Zimone is kind of, it's shocking. It's, extremely carbonated. It's very malty, very hoppy, very strong. But I remember we actually poured it onto a glass. We were being fancy. We were pretending it was champagne, and clinking glasses and really enjoying it. And I think that really sort of developed my palate for, and made me want to explore more complex beers. So yeah, that would probably be the one. That'd probably be the one.
Well, that's another very great and another great question right there. Like that's.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't want to be the only person not invited to the party. Guinness was my first beer that I had on my 21st. Yeah.
There you go. That's a good choice.
I had it on draft, so
there you go.
I knew, I planned it. I planned like the first beer I have is going to be a Guinness.
Absolutely.
That's something. Like there's something iconic about it, and
We've got a good marketing team at Diageo.
They do. And also a little bit of I'd say a little bit of history to follow behind. Like they've been consistently doing that, like in variation, of course. Like, but
I do think it's really interesting, not to steer the conversation towards Guinness, but one thing that I'm fixated on is that it's weird to me that, like, yeah, we talk about the history of Guinness, but when did they actually introduce the like nitrogenated stout as we know it today?
In the 60s, I think.
In the 60s, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so it's funny to me. It's funny to me that it's like, Budweiser or, these other American macrobreweries have arguably more of a claim to history than Guinness. But I'm curious, is the Guinness foreign extra stout, is that supposed to be like the pre-nitrogenated recipe? Okay.
So there's a little bit of, not controversy, but a little bit of vagaries about what the actual pre-nitrogen infused recipe for Guinness is. There is what's called the Guinness Original, which is basically the extra stout, but that is a little bit hit or miss depending where you get it. We talked about this in the review that we did. So the extra stout that I get in Canada is actually, Guinness has these flavor packets with like a concentrated flavor gel that they send in packets to local brewers. So they send it to Labatt in Canada, who takes a local pale ale and they mix in these flavor packets with the local pale ale, and that becomes Guinness extra stout. And so they do that with local breweries wherever around the world. So in terms of like Alessandro, like I think the foreign extra stout, that was always its own thing, right? But what was like, I think it was just Guinness stout before it was infused with the carbonate.
Mean, the foreign extra stout, like from my understanding, at least from when we talked to the archivist, is the recipe that can be traced back to what was the West Indies Porter.
West Indies Porter, yeah.
Which still exists. They still brew it. Supposedly the same recipe that Arthur came up with, but that's a recipe that he like specifically designed because to ship it to the West Indies. Now, which one they pick, like, and which combination they pick to become the actual nitrogenated version of the Guinness, I like Joe said, I don't think if somebody has the answers to that, like, I'd love to know. But like Joe said, like, it's probably a reasonable assumption to think it was maybe not the extra stout, but just a Guinness stout.
Yeah.
That like kind of like evolved into what then became, like, in the 60s, the nitrogenated version of Guinness.
Yeah, because from what I've seen, it was just Guinness stout. I mean, they had the foreign extra stout and the extra stout, but sorry, I just had a spider down on the web looking away. But yeah, it was just always Guinness stout, and then it became the nitrogen infused Guinness draft. So whether or not how that lines up with the products that are available today, it's a little mucky, but yeah. Have you ever tried the foreign extra stout, Nate?
I've
not. It's not available in my area, but
it's really good. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, I would. I mean, the extra stout is, it has, again, like, depending on what version you get. The one I get here in the US, like it's brewed in Ireland, or at least here in Florida, at least. But the foreign extra stout, like it's also usually just brewed in Ireland. So if you can get it, like, and you have a chance, like I would recommend the foreign extra stout, like more than the extra stout. Like it's
Oh,
I've
yeah.
definitely kept an eye on it. I think maybe last time I was in California, I saw it, and I'm planning on going back there somewhat soon. So I'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah,
It's a really interesting, complex, delicious beer.
yeah.
It's really, really good.
It's definitely not like or not, it can be, but I wouldn't consider it a sessionable beer. It's more of a, you
You
drink
have
one,
maybe two of them, but probably just one.
yeah, one, maybe a second one, but really it's a one, it's an experience. Like, well, like, when you think about a draft, like you can easily see yourself having one or two, maybe three. Like it's it's a little
5,
bit
6,
more of a,
7, 10.
yeah, exactly. Like it just flows after a while.
Oh man, yeah, it's so interesting, and that's actually a really good question. Guinness is fascinating. I we talk about it a lot on the channel, but one, because it's a beer that we really enjoy, that we have some memories and sentimental,
Mhm.
um, yeah, sentimental memories attached to it. But they have such an interesting history, and they're very important in the world of brewing. Um, and just the prominence that they have, like for so many people, even like the couple of people in chat, to say that that's the first beer that they had that they really enjoyed. I think that says a lot, because with the choice of beer that we have in North America or in Europe, to be able to go to the store and this wide selection that you have to choose from, the fact that a couple of people at least all in the same place at once say that Guinness was the first beer that they had that they really enjoyed. It says something. It's a special beer. It's not overly complex. It's nothing too groundbreaking, but it does what it does so well. So well.
It
As well,
definitely does.
I think it is time to wrap up our fall live stream. Thank you so much, everybody in the chat who joined us and asked questions. Those are fantastic questions. Garrett, that was amazing. Dave, thank you for all the comments. Duke Man, thanks for your question as well. Aki Tap Room. Everybody who joined us in chat and everybody who joined the live stream, thank you for joining us. Nate, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for popping in
having
with
me.
us and having a beer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
And-
again
And
for
again, if you
having
would
me.
like to
It's
join us,
always a lot of fun. I look forward to it every season.
so happy. It's so
It's-
much fun.
Yeah,
And
it's
if you would like to join
likewise.
us on a future live stream, there is a link down below. If you do want to become a supporter of the channel, you have the option to pop in and live stream as well, if you are so inclined. So check that out. And cheers, everybody. Keep an eye on the channel for more content upcoming. I did mention that we do have an episode coming up where a 1 liter Stein comes into play. That was something interesting. That is going to be coming very, very, very soon. Let's keep an eye open. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. Thanks, Nate.
Thank you. See ya.
And it's ended.